Mr. Speaker, this is an opportunity for these members now to give their views, to give their comments, and reach. Please do not, kindly members, we have not done this in finality. So we beseech you not to seem to be like you're correcting us. Appear to be like you are enriching the debate, you are enriching the proposals that we've come up with so that we can have the best for this country. We protect CDF, GAF, and introduce two other funds which are very critical in this country. As I wind up, Honorable Speaker, let me also give some insight in the matters that were in court. The first matter that was in court was the one that was challenging CDF Act of 2013, not NGCDF. Those are two different funds. CDF is the one that had been introduced and was overlapping with the functions of the counties. And the Supreme Court said that the CDF Act was offending the Constitution because it was actually purporting to perform some of the functions of the county. The other reasoning of the Supreme Court was that the way it was couched, it is like CDF was meant to dip into the jar of the consolidated fund and get money from there, therefore creating a third tier of government. I think to some extent, agree with some of their reasoning. But now, in the wisdom of this House, NGCDF Act of 2015 was enacted. That aligned the fund with the national government functions. And I believe we have a good case in the High Court. There is a High Court case number 178 of 2015, Honorable Speaker. I will not give comments on it. Otherwise, I would be taken to have, gone against the rules of this House under the Standing Order number 89, the sub judice rules, because this matter is active in court. It is alive. It has I'm informed by the litigation department that this matter has a date for submissions on the 1st and 2nd of December. Thereafter, judgment will be given. Honorable Speaker, I rest my submissions and I urge these members to support our statement and move this country forward through the support of the poor, the poor parents, the poor children who cannot otherwise access education without bursaries, which is also stemming from the NGCDF. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Honorable members, you've heard the proponents of the bill, the proposed bill in its pre-publication stage. What follows now is not debate as such, but general comments to engage and enrich the proposals put forward. Honorable Otienda Molo. The mic.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, first, I want to thank the Honorable Gishimu and the Honorable Mule for this legislative proposal. Tellingly, and it's appropriately not titled a bill, nor is it a motion, it's a legislative proposal, and at some appropriate time, Mr. Speaker, you'll be giving you a ruling on issues of amendment. Previously, when this House considered constitutional amendments under the Punguza Mzigo and the BBI, the Speaker then gave a ruling that it could not be amended. But I think out of abundance of caution...
Honorable Otienda Molo, each member, starting with yourself, will have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Your
Mr. Speaker, it is appropriate that at this stage, the movers consider getting the widest consultations. As you had directed, there will be public participation and develop consensus, and at an appropriate stage. Because of the possibility of difficulty of amendment, it would be appropriate to consult the Attorney General, the Kenya Law Reform Commission, and of course the drafters in this House. But I generally want to start by supporting this initiative. Mr. Speaker, at the outset, it is important for Kenyans to understand that when members of parliament speak of needing the CDF, they do not need it for themselves. With or without the CDF, the members of parliament have their salaries. And in fact, without the CDF, the workforce, the task is reduced. But Mr. Speaker, as we speak today, every day, and I'm sure I speak for all the members here, we get no less than 100 phone calls of children who are at home because they cannot get bursaries. So it is not the members who are suffering, it is the people. I want to announce, Mr. Speaker, that the one thing that unites Kenyans, and I had the privilege to write this constitution, everywhere we went, the one thing people supported was the CDF. And I will explain why we did not entrench it at the time. And I think we were wrong. We should have entrenched it at that time. Mr. Speaker, the principle of having the CDF is very noble. And it is the same principle of why we have devolved government at the county level. The same principle why in Article 173 we created the Judiciary Fund. So it's a bit ironical for the judiciary to find that the principle in the CDF is unconstitutional, but the Judiciary Fund is constitutional. Mr. Speaker, at the outset it should be stated that although we support, and I support this initiative and it will be moving forward, let it not be an excuse not to disburse CDF. I want to say here authoritatively, Mr. Speaker, that as we speak today, there is no court order, not of the High Court, not of the Court of Appeal, not of the Supreme Court, that stops disbursement of the CDF under the 2015 Act. None. And I want to urge that even as we meander our ways through this amendment, let the CDF be disbursed because it is constitutional as we speak. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Kaluma is, I think, has just arrived in this country. Mr. Speaker, I think that the drafting is very good. If you look at the drafting in terms of the proposal in 204A, it is appropriately placed because it comes immediately after the provisions on, on the fund that is similarly created for the purposes of bringing areas that have been behind. And if you look at this drafting, Mr. Speaker, it acknowledges that this is a national government fund. It acknowledges and proposes to increase it to 5%, which I think is appropriate. The more it is, the more Kenyans benefit, not us. But more importantly is the drafting in terms of being 5% of the Annual Division of Revenue Act. There has been an issue, and we all know, in terms of what you'd call gerrymandering by national government, and the counties have suffered this. And I think for us, this is very good. Mr. Speaker, I also want to note, however, that I will ask my 200 members to consider 2042. Insofar as it proposes that the funds be allocated and considered under Article 206(2)(c. I want to caution, Mr. Speaker, that the effect of that drafting is essentially to make this fund a charge on the consolidated fund. And I do not think that's what they intended. We do not need to go that way. Once we've put the percentages and we are the budget-making body, it becomes automatic. We do not need to make it a charge on the consolidated fund. Mr. Speaker, I support the idea of creating the Senate Oversight Fund and the Affirmative Action Fund. We can debate the percentages, that is fine. But, Mr. Speaker, I urge them, and only 2 more minutes, Mr. Speaker, I urge them to consider restricting it in 2 ways. One, it cannot be a fund to the senators to use if you are the senator for Siaya to go and use in Mombasa. Those funds must be restricted to the county where you are elected, and that so far is not done. And secondly, there must be a distinction between elected senators, elected members, and nominated members. Those nominated may not have equal responsibility as those who are elected. Otherwise, Mr. Speaker, I think this is a good initiative. I think that this is one of those areas that require bipartisan support and consensus. And when it comes to Treasury, We expect that although it's a money bill, Treasury will support us. This is where, Mr. Speaker, we must assert ourselves as Parliament. If we cannot assert ourselves here, we will never assert ourselves anywhere. Let it be the first constitutional amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable. The Honorable Lotte Titus from Kacheliba. He logged in and left. Where is he?
Here. Mr. Speaker, I rise up today to discuss this very important matter that touches on this House, that is the National Government Constituency Development Fund, and also put a lot of emphasis on the National Government Affirmative Action Fund, having been the CEO, the immediate CEO of this fund. Mr. Speaker, I think when the President was addressing this House, he actually accepted that the fund called the National Government Constituency Fund be put into the Constitution. And I think this should be and must be the first constitutional amendment that this House is supposed to do. Mr. Speaker, if you look at the developments, just like as exposed by the member and the mover, the development that this fund has done into the constituencies, you will attest to me that this is the only fund that can be seen to have acted and to have action in this country. The reason why we've got a lot of children crying now, a lot of parents crying, is because this fund is not in circulation now. And I think this fund has got a lot of public support. So for me, Mr. Speaker, I want to say, without mixing my words, that every item of the budget of this government, if it is not anything centering around the NGCDF and the NGAF funding, it will not be able to reach to the Wanjiko. I know we've got other initiatives that the government want to use to be able to reach to the people, the ASLA fund and the rest. This is the only fund, Mr. Speaker, that touches the lives of the persons at the ground. If you look at the ASLA fund, there are conditions for you to be able to meet and reach this fund, the ASLA fund. But the CDF is a fund that cuts across all. And so as we do the amendments, Mr. Speaker, as we actually take this to the public for debate and for inputs of suggestion, I want is to be looked at in this way, Mr. Speaker, and this is the reason why I've stood. It is stated, and I want to appreciate what you've said, that there are drafters in this House that are picking what members are saying for it to be included when the final bill comes up. I do not understand why this funding was only locked to security and education. I think there are other things that this fund is supposed to do. And because we have been given time now as members of parliament to actually put this into our constitution, I want the members and also the members of the public, the members of this House and the members of the public, including the Senate, to open up the space that this fund can do. Currently, as we speak, Mr. Speaker, we actually know that Schedule 4 of the Constitution gives effect to what the national government can do and what the county government can do. CDF is anchored on the national government. And I want it to be clear, because if we look at what the national government does, sometimes we find that there is a replication of what the county government are doing. Water, for example, is done at both levels and different capacities. I will want, Mr. Speaker, to urge this House to consider including water, because the people that are suffering even now are the members of parliament. People are calling the members of parliament even to supply water. And yet, we are told this is a county government function. I want members, as we debate on this motion, as we look at how we can actually entrench this into constitution, for us to look at how CDF can be able to handle the issues of water. In any case, 80% of Kenya, 85% is arid and semi-arid. And the issue of water is key. As we look at education and everything else, members, let us consider including this provision of water in this CDF, and this is our fund, and this is the fund that can make an impact. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honorable Jane Kihara.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this chance. Mr. Speaker, I am a pioneer of CDF. Remember, Mr. Speaker, we were with you in Parliament last time. And in fact, the Honorable Namamba took CDF to court until he became a member of Parliament. Then he realized how important this fund is. Mr. Speaker, this is the most devolved fund in this country. And why Honorable Muriuki Karowe came up with it, there was a time, there was this very famous phrase that a development project will be done when funds become available. So the regions that never supported the government of the day never got development. So this one goes to every corner of the country. Mr. Speaker, I happen to also have been a wife of an MP who didn't have CDF. Honorable Speaker, it was such a difficult leadership where I would see my husband selling a cow and giving out all that money to a parent whose kid was not in school. This is how this fund is important. Mr. Speaker, you know that time, we used to do hospitals, we used to do water, like the honorable member is asking, until this devolution came. That time, we used to do everything. I was in the pioneer committee of NGCDF, or CDF then, and I happened to travel this country. Today, as we talk, Kenyans do not know that an MP, member of parliament, would just sit here and make laws. Members of parliament are supposed to give. If there's nothing to give, and it's not just giving, it's distributing. It feels so good, Mr. Speaker, when a young man comes and tells me, Madam Kihara, I went to school courtesy of your CDF, and I'm working in this place. It feels very, very good. As we talk, calls are coming because we need, these people need bursary. Bursary is very key, and in fact, if there is a segment of bursary that goes to county government, I wish Honorable Geshibo and Honorable Mule would bring it to CDF, channel it through CDF, because we are the people who are with the students and the parents, and we know where it bites. Mr. Speaker, let me say this. I happen to have been at the place where this idea by Mr. Mule, Honorable Mule and Geshimo was muted, and I thought this is the greatest idea. Today, if we don't have CDF, this marginalization would go to the regions that have not supported a particular government. These are the people who are representing the electorate and their children and their families and everything. So this NGCDF, in fact, I remember a parent telling me, if they block it, tell all of us Kenyans to come out to the streets because they know how they benefit or the children benefit. So without much ado, Honorable Geshimo, Honorable Mule, thank you very much. Let us support this because we are the people representing the electorate. We are the ones who know where it bites. We are the ones who know that if you don't support a government, there are chances that you not get development. Thank you, and I support.
Very well. Minority Leader.
Thank you, the Honorable Speaker. Let me just add my voice to this very important debate. I And I want to start by thanking the Honorable Gichimu and the Honorable Mule for making this very vital step towards ensuring that NGCDF, among the other funds that are proposed, is entrenched in the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, I want to join my colleagues who have spoken before me in making a case for NGCDF in particular. And I want to be very, very brief, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is not in doubt that right from independence up to date, there have been funds that have been allocated every other financial year to the national government, departments and ministries and agencies towards certain projects which are critical and vital for the development of this country. I have in point, for example, funds that have continually been allocated for infrastructure in schools through the Ministry of Education. The other case, Mr. Speaker, is funds allocated towards bursaries, again, for our children through the same Ministry of Education. We have also had funds allocated towards construction of security installations such as police stations, administration offices, and so on and so forth through the Ministry of Interior and its predecessors. But one running thread is that in all these cases, prior to the advent of the NGCDF or its predecessor, the CDF, nothing was there to show for these funds. If you travel across the country and ask yourselves, where are the funds that have been earmarked for these development projects through the respective ministries, you would not be shown any, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, the coming into being of CDF and now NGCDF was kind of a revolution. And it is not in doubt that the NGCDF has been felt far and wide across every breadth and width of this country. As we speak again, to iterate what has been said earlier by my colleagues, we have cases, very, very many cases. If I talk of my constituency, for instance, of children who were never able to report for third term this year. There are children of poor Kenyans who have relied all along on NGCDF for bursaries, who have continued to languish at home since the opening of the third term this year. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there are projects which had been earmarked in the education sector in terms of improvement of school infrastructure, vital facilities such as laboratories and libraries, Mr. Speaker. Vital facilities such as police stations and police posts all over the country, which have either stalled or have not taken off as a result of this stalemate on NGCDF. So, Speaker, if you look at the impact NGCDF has made in the lives of ordinary Kenyans across the country, you would agree with me that anybody putting roadblocks on the path of NGCDF, anybody trying to outlaw NGCDF, anybody trying to make NGCDF in operation, anybody trying to make NGCDF not to come into operation, Mr. Speaker, is essentially an enemy of the people. There can be no greater enemy of the people than that person who is trying to sabotage NGCDF. And therefore, this House has a destiny with history. We must choose to be on the right side of history. We must choose as a House to assert ourselves and make this move so that this debate, this haggling, this back and forth with the judiciary is put to rest once and for all, by entrenching NGCDF among these other funds in the Constitution, and as quickly as
Very well.
Dr. Robert Pokose.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, for allowing me to join my colleagues on making comments on this constitutional amendment by the Honorable Kishimu and Honorable Stephen Mule, member for Matungulu, and member for Gishugu, respectively. Honorable Speaker, when you look at the proposed legislation, constitutional legislation on CDF, on national government constituency, on GAF, on the Senate, establishment of the National Government Constituency Development Fund, on legislation to also establish the Senate Oversight Fund, this, Honorable Speaker, is a very progressive amendment. I remember last year when we had the BPI fraud, in it there was also a proposal. It had some good proposal like amendment to the CDF and making it a constitutional provision. And I think Honorable Mule and Honorable Gishimu has seized the better parts of that proposed amendment to be able to do something that I would say noble, because CDF has done a lot. Even when you go to the county, you might not see any, in other counties, you might not see any serious county project, but you'll always see this is a CDF project. Is it a classroom? Is it a chief's office? Is it a DC's office? DCC's office? Is it an ACC office? Is it a police station? And many other projects that have been done through CDF. Not just that, we have, as my colleagues have said, we've seen students benefiting through CDF allocations. Honorable Speaker, even as we speak now, many of us are getting calls from our constituents. When are we dispersing the bursaries? Because many of the parents, I'll talk on behalf of the great people of Endebess. You have many needy students who their education is almost wholly dependent on CDF. We have infrastructure for schools, which has been improved through CDF. So I think making it, putting it into our constitution to protect this very important fund is an obligation for this House. And I hope that members will need to take note, because we will need to have, when the time comes, as it is going to be published now, it will take, maybe for the new members, it will take 90 days. After 90 days, then we can have second reading of this bill. Then, because it's a parliamentary initiative, it needs 2/3 of our support, and it will also go to the Senate to get 2/3 so that this bill can be actualized. My only take, Honorable Speaker, is the proposed 5%, whether it is able to be accommodated within our budget, or it will be, or it needs some bit of amendment before it is published to maybe 3% or even 3.5, because we need to be also realistic in terms of that. Yeah, that is my suggestion, but you have your own suggestion. But hopefully, let's hope the economy will grow. With those few remarks, I'll support this amendment.
Very well. TJ Kajwang. Mr. Speaker, 5 minutes is so short, I may not do justice to this. I just want to be the devil's advocate here. We have agreed, as Senior Counsel Otiende Amolo has said, that the drafting of the CDF bit of it looks to be well done. And, well, you can work on the mathematics of 5% or whichever percentage, but I think the drafting itself looks to be good. I want to ask you, the promoters of these bills, that please draw a small caucus around you which can help you. This bill is so important for us to waste. Anything that will make us succeed is important. Have a small caucus that will direct you, especially on the drafting and on the constitutional law around this. For example, I've seen you have talked about Senate, you call it oversight. And then you have talked about some other things, stimulus, and then you have talked about something else. We don't want anything that will poison CDF. And if you want to know how poison works, remember BBI. BBI was completely killed because some people who thought they knew more than the others put so much poison that it could not be completely, consumed. So please, we don't want to do anything around this, but let us have this CDF. So I propose, first of all, Mr. Speaker, this conjoining, the fact that Honorable Gishimo and Honorable Mule, I suggest that every bill should go by its own. Let us have 4 bills so that no poison, nothing poisons the other. If another falls, let it fall by its side, because we don't want something to spoil the broth that we will make. You know, you're talking about Senate oversight. What you are forgetting is that there is Article 127 of the Constitution, sub-Article 6, which gives Parliament the authority to facilitate members. Now, whether Parliament has been doing this or whether it is sufficient for Senate is another matter. But you will have problems. The first question you'll have to ask, is that provision that you are going to put not inconsistent with Article 127 sub-Article 6? That's the number one. Number two, there is no institution called Senate. The institution that Parliament, the Constitution knows is Parliament. Did I say the other way? There is nothing called Senate in terms of the Constitution. What the Constitution knows is Parliament. So you can't talk about giving oversight to a specific body as though you want to change the institutions which run around it. You will have a constitutional problem. Because until you change Article 95, which cannot be changed without referendum, you will have a technical problem of one amendment running contrary to the other. Number three, even this oversight, you see, let us not make people think that CDF is ours in our pockets, that we use CDF to enrich ourselves. Because I have had people say that just because there is an oversight committee in CDF, so we can use that oversight committee to do things. No. Even we need oversight. We need money for oversight. Our role under Article 95 is oversight. It has nothing to do with CDF. CDF is the people's money. So we also need this parliamentary oversight so that we can be able to do our job. Now that thing, again, you call stimulus, you will have a problem with the mandarins at Treasury. And we don't want the fight in executive to come and spoil for us a good thing in CDF. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to support, but please draw a small caucus that will help you clean up this thing, that then when it becomes to the floor, it will sail through. Thank you very much.
Very well. There are a number of interventions here which I think were for the earlier matter. And we have on Yusuf with intervention. You may remove them. Irene, intervention. On Robert Basili, intervention. We have on Geoffrey, intervention. So you could remove them so that you
have the mainstream keying in. Now, next is Cliff Gisairo of Kitutu.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And also let me thank Honorable Gishimo and Honorable Mule for bringing this to the floor of the House. Today, as we sit here, the poor Kenyans are watching us very keenly because we are the representatives of the poor. NGCDF is what has changed lives back at home, back in the villages. Today, as I'm speaking, most of my constituents, Kitutu Masaba, children are on extended holiday because they are not able to report to schools. They are on forced extended holiday. We'll want to quote CDF as money for the members of parliament, but that's not the truth. No member of parliament has his children going to school courtesy of bursaries. This is money for the poor. So we have to support this amendment so that we have it firmly installed in our Constitution to ensure that the poor child is protected and guaranteed to go on with school. We have infrastructural funds that are usually given by the ministry. But if you look at how equitable that is done, you'll find that some areas have never received that money. You'll find national schools, one national school having received in a certain period over 160 million shillings. Whereas all the schools in my constituency, they get peanuts. They do not have laboratories. They do not have classrooms. And only this can be done by NGCDF. This is the only fund that touches the poor. We are here because the people who lined up to vote for us are the poor. Very few of you were voted here by the rich. So while we stand here, let us know that our key role is to defend the poor. And this is one of it. While at it, Honorable Mule and Gishimu, in the whole document, I propose that, as one honorable member stated, that we include elements like water into the NGCDF, because as we move it to 5%, that means more funds. Let us have water covered into this fund to support the communities get water. Also, the allocation on sports should be slightly increased from the current, I think, 1% of the allocation, because sport is also a key activity in our communities. This will help us nurture talent and support the youths. It's not just education. Sometimes some youths are talented in sports. Let us have more funds for these youths to be promoted in their respective fields of sports and any other extracurricular activity where they thrive in. Mr. Speaker, I stand here as one person who was educated by bursaries. I know the importance of this. If we don't do this and have it in the Constitution, if we don't work together for the sake of the poor Kenyan out there, we'll have let ourselves down. I support this, and as a member of the NGCDF committee, we'll work together to make sure that this passes and the poor man in the villages get what is theirs. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Rebecca Tonkei, Narok.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. First of all, I want to thank the Almighty God for giving me this opportunity to serve in the August House. I stand here now to give my maiden speech because I've never spoken since I was sworn in. In fact, Mr. Speaker, sir, I've been inserting my card since I was sworn in, and unfortunately, I've never caught the Speaker's eye. All the same, I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity, and I thank the people of Narok for giving me the opportunity to serve in this House. Mr. Speaker, sir, I know being here is not an easy thing, and the members will agree with us that we've been here. To be here, it takes the hand of God. We went round looking for votes, and at the end of the day, the Lord gave us the opportunity to be here. I thank God because I was here one time as a staffer. I've worked in Parliament, in the Research Department, I've worked in the Human Resource Department, and therefore being here to me is an opportunity that I cannot take it for granted. Mr. Speaker, sir, I know the Massa is there, and the people of Narok County are looking and waiting upon me to give them service. And I promise them that I'll be here to serve them since they gave me the opportunity to be here. Mr. Speaker, sir, there are so many youths out there who are not employed. Many teachers who are trained and they have never gotten the opportunity to be employed. And being in the Education Committee, Mr. Speaker, sir, I know I'll be the voice of those many youths who are trained as teachers and have never gotten the opportunity. There are many teachers there who are so frustrated, especially with the issue of delocalization. In fact, Narok County is mostly hit by delocalization. And this issue, Mr. Speaker, sir, I thank the member who brought this, the motion or the bill in the House so that we can amend this policy whereby teachers are delocalized. Because in Narok County, Mr. Speaker, sir, the teachers who are employed are not equivalent to the ones who are delocalized. You find the teachers who are posted to Narok County, Mr. Speaker, sir, are not equivalent to the ones who are employed. And this one, to us as people's employees, because we've been employed by the people, we are going to fight this to ensure that we get the right number of teachers equivalent to the ones who are posted out of the county. Mr. Speaker, sir, I know there are many issues, problems that are facing the people of Narok, like infrastructure, the roads, and people like me are victims. I know Honorable Pareyo will agree with me that coming from Narok North is the worst hit place. When it rains, we cannot even go to our homes. And for over 50 years since independence, Mr. Speaker, sir, Narok has no roads. It is a big challenge, which I know, especially having my honorable member, Pareyo, who is the Constituency MP, we are going to address this issue. Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to also talk on the girls' pregnancies. And I know this issue is a big issue. Right now, we are facing a challenge in our schools. We have 741 girls who are pregnant, and they've not been in school. They have dropped out of school. It's an issue which we are going to also address. And I want to tell the people of Narok County that I am here as Mama County, and these issues will be addressed. Mr. Speaker, sir, on the issue of the amendment, the bill before us here, Mr. Speaker, sir, I support this. Whenever we go to the counties, every Friday and Monday over the weekends, we get so many parents coming to us. In fact, my office is flocked, the county office, because people are waiting to see if the members can support those poor children, the needy ones, who cannot afford to go to school because they have no funds to do that. Mr. Speaker, sir, this bill is timely, and we are going to give it full support so that these monies can be dispersed and our people can be able to get bursaries. The women who are waiting for us to give them funds to be able to do issues like Ushanga, things like groups, women groups, and all that can get that money. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, I submit, I support the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Honorable Member for Mandera East.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. This is a very important bill as it has really changed the lives of our people. National government CDF has played a very important role in especially the marginalized areas in this country. In Mandera, where I come from, before CDF, we had no much projects. We had no bursaries for our students. We had no offices for our administration offices, including the chiefs. But now this has really changed. CDF has built schools. It has built offices for our chiefs. It has built houses for our security officers. Since we came in as members of parliament in August, because there was no CDF released since then, students are crying, parents are really having problems. So many students, needy and poor students, are now out of school. We expect this bill to move very fast and entrenched in the Constitution so that these needy students can be helped and returned back to school. Just last week I was in my constituency, and the chiefs were complaining that, you know, they hear their cases under a tree. In these modern times, we cannot accept our chiefs to hear cases under a tree. I expect to build as many offices as possible for my chiefs, and as many houses as possible for my police officers, so that they can be motivated and do their job as required by law. I also support the increment from 2.5% to 5%, so that we can do, more, we can carry out more projects, and more students benefit out of these funds. I also request the drafters to include, this thing is now limited to only security and education. I expect them to open it up so that we can buy agricultural equipments for our people. In Mandera, we have River Dawa, and there are, farms in the river banks. People require agricultural equipment so that they can carry out, their activities. But you see, our hands are tied that this money cannot be used to buy those equipments. We are only allowed to invest in educational activities and security activities. So if we open it up, we can do as much projects as possible in different departments. We also need to, use this money in even, building low-cost houses for our needy people. We can use it if it's possible. If you have the budget, you can use this money appropriately in other projects. I therefore support this bill, and I expect this to be fast-tracked. And I also request the Ministry of Treasury to release these funds and not use the excuse of delaying it following.
Very well. Honorable Member for Igembe Central is next.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I first congratulate Honorable Mule and Honorable Kishimo for this motion, for bringing forth this bill. Honorable Speaker, this NGCDF fund has been a very important fund to every Kenyan, and I think this is the only fund that stands for everyone, regardless of where you come from, which party you are affiliated to, or how many terms you've served in parliament. Is truly a fund which is serving each and everyone equally. This is the fund that is given to us as community leaders, or rather to the communities that we represent, for improving their living standards, mostly through education and security as it stands now. And I think with this fund entrenched into the Constitution, it will be a fund of future and a fund that will be guaranteed, and not any other and dig will go to court and suspend it. I support this idea because right now that we have it, not known its whereabouts, we have very many kids at home. The education standards is paralyzed. You know, the government policy on 100% transition needs a lot of structures. And these structures could only have been put in place with the CDF standing. Mr. Speaker, considering CDF funds with other funds in this country, the most visible development projects that are seen are those from CDF. And that's why when we talk of the CDF being increased from 2.5 to 5%, it's a good idea because it will bring more developments, it will increase more structures, and it will pay school fees for even more kids. But I'm of the idea that when this fund is being distributed to the constituencies, it would have served better if we can go with the policy of one man, one vote, one shilling, so that a constituency having 10 or 15,000 people is not given equal amount to that which has more than 200,000 people, so that everybody will get equal share and it will serve us equally. Mr. Speaker, the senior lawyers have spoken about other funds, and I believe they've given the necessary advice to the two gentlemen, honorable members, and this fund will be fully protected, and we look forward to having this fund increased to continue serving us. Finally, Mr. Speaker, as I support this fund, I'm saying let's work very fast on it, support it, and look forward to having it released very soon so that our kids can go back to school. Mr. Speaker, especially in my area where I represent Igembe Central, all the standing infrastructures are there courtesy of CDF. And with the increasement of the fund, we look forward to putting up more structures and supporting more kids. And thank you for this opportunity, and may God bless us all.
Very well. Honorable Member from Mbeere South is next.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. Mr. Speaker, I want to join other members of this House in congratulating the members, those two members who have brought this debate on the CDF to be anchored in the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, like it has been mentioned, the CDF or the NG CDF is the only one which is feasible in our constituencies. Our constituencies have got other government departments which have got responsibility, and they are also given allocations. But the money which is allocated to these other government departments is not visible. For example, if we talk of health, we know there's always an outcry of the hospitals having no medicine. Mr. Speaker, those people who get sick and they cannot access medicine, they end up at the MP's house or office to seek for support. Mr. Speaker, we know it has been mentioned in this house that all issues of death and other national disasters, they also end up at the MP's house. While we know very well that there's a disaster fund. Mr. Speaker, what am I trying to say? Members of the public are not aware of these other funds which are supposed to help them. The only thing they know is the NG-CDF. And so anything arising to our poor citizens, they associate it with the MP, and they seek for support, irrespective whether it is a national government responsibility or it is a county government responsibility. Mr. Speaker, I support the broadening of the scope of the NG-CDF so that the members of parliament can be able to cater effectively for the constituents who voted them in. It has been mentioned that water is a major issue. Mr. Speaker, most of us who are here in this house, who come from the arid and semi-arid areas, end up spending their own money to support schools with clean water. And if this was in the NG-CDF, it would be easy to bring water to schools and even to some of our communities. Mr. Speaker, there's something I want to raise here. Even other government departments who get their own vote, they also resort to coming to NG-CDF for support. For example, I know there are several cases where the government administrations have come to NG-CDF to ask for them to purchase land to put up government structures. That means this fund is actually recognized not just by the citizens we are representing, but even other government departments, they do recognize the NG-CDF as a fund which is being utilized properly to support every sector, both the government and even the local citizens. It has been proposed, and I second, that this bill should not be bundled with others for the sake of having it to sail on its own. Mr. Speaker, I think we need to consider having the NG-CDF being debated or being prepared on its own, while others funds also are prepared on their own. The reason being that this is a fund which has been tested and its impact has been seen in this country. About increasing it to 5%, Mr. Speaker, sir, I would even propose that it goes higher. Because like what I mentioned about the disaster fund, the disaster fund, like now we have got famine, it is not covering us well. But if some money of disaster are vacant in the NG-CDF, every constituency is able to cater for whatever disaster is facing their constituents. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity. Thank you.
Very well. Honorable Member for Dagoretti South.
Mr. Speaker, I thank you. And I want to first start by saying that this House is finally now doing business. After we have been done with the preliminary issues that we were prosecuting the last few weeks, I do feel now that we are in the real business of this House. Mr. Speaker, it is commendable what the Honorable Mule has done and what the Honorable Wakili Geshimo have done by actually presenting such an impressive legislative proposal that seeks to amend the Constitution to entrench decentralized funds in our Constitution, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I'm speaking from a constituency that has seen the impact of a decentralized fund in the name of CDF. Mr. Speaker, in the last 5 years, the Dagoretti South constituency has built 5 new high schools from scratch to completion, 5 new high schools that are now being used by residents of the Dagoretti South constituency. We have been able to get all our chiefs from Mabati structures. None of our chiefs is in a Mabati structure. They are now in very good, habitable, modern offices. We have been able to build police station upon police station. The grand, ultra-modern Reruta police station, multi-story, digitized. OB is in the computer. Mr. Speaker, we have been able to build the Mokarara Central Kitchen, out of which we are able to feed 10,000 students every day. A kitchen that has a capacity of feeding up to 20,000 pupils, Mr. Speaker, in our comprehensive school feeding program. Mr. Speaker, this is just to mention a few of the things that CDF is able to do if well managed, if well oversighted, if well superintended. Mr. Speaker, that is why I rise to support this motion. And in fact, I want to say that when it comes to the committee stage, Mr. Speaker, I shall be proposing some amendments. These amendments are actually builds to this proposal. And I think the House was very wise in having a pre-publication conference where members are able to ventilate, put in some bills so that the proposers are able to just draft anew and include some of these amendments. Mr. Speaker, it is my view that if CDF is working so well for constituencies as a decentralized funds, then we should be thinking how much further can we decentralize funds, Mr. Speaker. That is why the amendment that I want to do is to introduce, it is clause 204, and I want to introduce a new segment, clause 204E, which will seek to further establish an equitable development fund, which shall be a county government fund, which shall be consisting of monies of not less than a certain percentage of the share of the revenue that is allocated to each county as divided by County Allocation Revenue Act enacted pursuant to Article 218. Mr. Speaker, this clause in its second part will read that all monies allocated under this article shall be considered as funds allocated towards pursuant to Article 207(2)(a) to be administered in accordance to the provisions of an Act of Parliament, and 3, Parliament shall enact legislation to make further provisions for the operation of this article. Mr. Speaker, I had thought that I would push a floor amendment, but I later got to understand what it is we are doing this afternoon, because what we are doing is a pre-conference, Mr. Speaker. And I want to note, Mr. Speaker, that even as we speak now, we have in your gallery, the Speaker's gallery, members of county assembly from different counties, Mr. Speaker. We have the Honorable Mwaura from Nairobi City County. We have the Honorable Mutie. We have the Honorable Namina, who are here to see if members can be magnanimous enough to see as they enjoy the CDF, whether we can unlock what members of county assemblies have been unable to unlock with their governors, Mr. Speaker. Let us see how we shall be able to decentralize further funds, so because we've seen the effect of decentralizing funds and the impact they have, and the benefits that accrue will be for the good of this nation, for the people who elect us. And Mr. Speaker, this is the work we came to do in Parliament. I thank you for the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Very well. On Adan Haji, Mandera East West, is in the house.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. I sincerely thank Honorable Gishumu and Honorable Mule for having brought this statement at the right time. As we know very well, CDF is the only devolved fund that is everywhere, every corner of this country, and the most rural area of this country. The only fund visible, the only activities that are visible are activities that has been undertaken by CDF. And unlike other funds, like even the county development funds, which after communities do some work, the delay in payment for years,
Yes, on Kiare, what is out of order?
It's not in my place to interrupt the very esteemed ranking member Yusuf, but I think this is critical, Mr. Speaker, because we've been having very many fights on this fund, especially with institutions that do not understand how CDF works. I think it is not in order for the Honorable Yusuf to refer to CDF as a devolved fund. In fact, one of the biggest problems we are having is when people imagine that CDF can undertake devolved functions. So, Mr. Speaker, I would wish that the Honorable Yusuf could actually refer to CDF as a decentralized fund that is able to do national government functions in constituencies and not refer to it as a devolved funds. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah, I think.
Very well,
thank you so much.
You may continue.
Thank you so much for correcting me there. You are very right. This is not part of the devolved fund. It is the central government fund that has reached the most remotest area. I was just saying that developments undertaken by other funds, if you look at the payment schedules, what do you call that? Constituency development fund payments are very prompt. That is why, however little it is, even contractors who do classrooms, who do police stations, who do chief's office, they prefer the national government CDF fund projects than taking big projects from the counties, which sometimes it takes 3 years, 4 years, or even 5 years to be paid. And the projects that are done by national government CDF fund are projects which are community felt need. The processes that are undertaken are processes which involve all community sectors, the women, the youth, and they come up with their preferred projects, and ultimately the projects that are done becomes the serious felt needs of the projects. Wananchi, wherever they are talking about CDF. Now that since we were elected in August up to now, there's no CDF released, a lot of students are dropping out of school just because there's no bursary. But you still hear there's bursary allocation in other parts of other accounts or other funds. But the ones which are really felt, the ones which really do some job, the ones where students are highly relying on and making sure that they are going to school and studying is the NG-CDF fund. And as we are here today, whatever has gone to court is CDF, is not NG-CDF. And therefore, I urge the Treasury to release CDF with immediate effect so that our students, our poor students who have been seriously hit by the drought, parents who have been seriously hit by drought, parents who lost their livestock will be able to take their children to school through the CDF come January. Therefore, it's my request that Treasury releases the ND-CDF money with immediate effect so that it can be processed. Finally, expanding it to 5%, I think this is a noble idea.
Okay, very well. Next to speak on this is Joseph Gitari, Kirinyaga Central.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Honorable members, I would really want to ask you to be patient. We are actually following the queue and also trying to make sure that there's fairness. I'm very happy about the ranking members who are very patient in the House, and I can see them here. You may proceed.
Thank you, Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. I want to congratulate Honorable Geshimu and Honorable Mure for bringing this timely debate. Honorable Speaker, on start, I want to remind Kenyans that what was annulled in court was the CDF Act 2013, and we still have NGCDF 2015. Honorable Speaker, I was in this parliament, 10th and 11th parliament, and I know how these two acts came into place. So I would ask the CS in charge of National Treasury not to shy away because we are covered. As we speak, Mr. Speaker, we have kids at home. We are receiving calls because we don't have money for bursary. And bearing in mind that the Form 4s and Class 8 are doing their exams, and even the others in Class 6 to go to junior secondary school, it is a critical moment where we are supposed to be having that money so that we issue bursaries to avoid the Form 4 classes from being interrupted. Honorable Speaker, when I served in 11th Parliament, CDF was active, and there were no restrictions as such because most of the functions were not devolved. I clearly remember in Kirinyaga Central, we did 11 dispensaries, and these dispensaries are ongoing, about 7 of them. Honorable Speaker, when these functions were devolved to the county government, if you go to any constituency, if you go to any county, you can show what CDF has been doing since the onstart by Mheshimiwa Muriuki Karue, Engineer Muriuki Karue. Mr. Speaker, if you go to any part of the country, you'll find CDF offices, you'll find chiefs being housed, like in Kirinyaga Central. When I served as a member of parliament in 10th and 11th parliament, we were able to house all the chiefs and assistant chiefs. We even went ahead and we were able to even, in our main police station, Kirogoya police station, to do houses for the police. Mr. Speaker, if you go to any constituency and compare, let's say the county development, compare with the CDF, you'll be shocked because CDF projects are very many. Mr. Speaker, I want to agree and disagree with some of our colleagues. I was imagining, as much as the provision of the Constitution does not envisage Senate, Mr. Speaker, we need to that at the end of the day in these chambers, and we need our colleagues in the Senate to support this with two that. Mr. Speaker, you remember in the presidential debate, the opening of this parliament, His Excellency the President said that he knows what CDF has done in this country. And I remember at a point, he said we look at the ways of where we can incorporate the National Assembly and Senate so that we can have some funding for them. So I want us to embrace our brothers in Senate so that at least we can gather the two-thirds majority. I support this move, Mr. Speaker, and we'll be causing some amendments at the right time because we even have to think about our counties and whatever is happening, right, Mr. Speaker? Because there is the proposed World Development Fund that was initiated by Mheshimiwa Kangata, who is a governor now,